In a small quiet village, lived a young woman named Ego. Ego was full of life and dreams, but her life took a tragic turn when she found out she was pregnant at the age of 19. The father of her unborn child, a young man named Tob whom she loved deeply, abandoned her as soon as she shared the news. When she opened up to her parents, instead of support, Ego's parents were furious. "You have brought shame to this family," her father shouted, his voice filled with anger. Her mother, though sad, stood silently by her husband's decision. Within days, Ego was disowned by her family. The villagers gossiped endlessly, calling her names and treating her like an outcast. "Who will marry a girl like that?" they whispered behind her back. Feeling broken but determined, Ego decided to leave the village. She packed a small bag, carrying only a few clothes and the little money she had saved. With nowhere else to go, she traveled to a small town several miles away. In this new town, life was harsh. Ego struggled to find work, and being pregnant only made it harder. People were reluctant to hire her. "We need someone strong," they would say, shaking their heads. But Ego refused to give up. She started doing odd jobs, washing clothes, cleaning homes, and selling fruits in the market. Even with her growing belly, she worked tirelessly. Months later, Ego gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. She named him Kenechukwu, promising herself that she would give him a better life, no matter what it took. Holding him in her arms, she felt a new kind of strength. Kenechukwu became her world. As time went on, Ego caught the attention of a few men. She was beautiful, hardworking, and kind. But each time a man showed interest, they pulled away when they learned about Kenechukwu. "I can't compete with your son for your attention," one of them told her. Another man, though kind at first, quickly lost interest, saying, "You will never love me fully." It hurt Ego deeply. She wanted to love again, to have a partner to share her struggles with, but no one seemed willing to accept her and her child. She began to believe that maybe she was meant to walk this journey alone. Despite the heartbreak, Ego kept moving forward. She worked harder than ever, saving every penny she could. Slowly, she started a small business selling fabrics. Though it wasn't much, it was enough to feed and clothe Kenechukwu. At night, when Kenechukwu was asleep, Ego would look at him and smile through her tears. "I'll do everything for you," she whispered to him. "You grow up strong and successful, my son." Ego's days were often busy with work and caring for her son. Kenechukwu, at 10 years old, was a bright and curious boy. He loved school and always came home eager to tell his mother about his day. Their small house was often filled with his laughter, and Ego felt a deep sense of pride watching her son grow. One sunny afternoon, as Ego prepared a simple lunch, Kenechukwu returned from school with a thoughtful look on his face. He hesitated for a moment before sitting down at the small wooden table. "Mama," he began, his voice soft. "Yes, my dear. How was school today?" Ego replied, her back turned as she stirred the pot on the stove. "Do I have a father?" Ego froze. She felt the wooden spoon in her hand tremble slightly. In all these years, Kenechukwu had never asked about his father. She had hoped he might never ask, but here it was, the question she had dreaded. She turned slowly to face him. Kenechukwu's big, curious eyes looked up at her, filled with innocence and longing. She pulled a chair and sat beside him, placing a hand gently on his. "You do have a father, Kenechukwu," she began. "But he isn't with us. He left a long time ago, even before you were born." Why did he leave us? Kenechukwu asked. Ego took a deep breath, her heart aching at the memory. When I found out I was going to have you, I told your father. His name is Tob. At first, I thought he would be happy, but he wasn't. He said he wasn't ready to be a father and wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. I begged him, Kenechukwu. I begged him to stay, but he walked away. Kenechukwu's face was solemn, and Ego felt a pang of guilt. But she knew he deserved the truth. After that, my parents disowned me, and I had to leave the village. I haven't seen Tob since, and I don't know where he is or what he's doing now. Kenechukwu was quiet for a moment, processing her words. Then he reached out and hugged her tightly. It's okay. You're the best parent I could ever have. Ego held him close, tears welling up in her eyes. She silently vowed to be enough for him, to give him everything she could so he wouldn't feel the absence of his father. The following day, Ego took Kenechukwu to the market to buy a few household items. The bustling market was noisy as usual, filled with the sounds of traders shouting and people bargaining for goods. Kenechukwu held onto Ego's hand as they moved through the crowd. As they walked past a fabric store, Ego suddenly stopped in her tracks. There, standing just a few feet away, was Tob. He looked older but still recognizable, tall, with a confident stance and a bright smile. He was chatting with someone, seemingly oblivious to Ego's presence. Ego's heart raced. She tightened her grip on Kenechukwu's hand and stepped closer. Tob, she called out. Tob turned, and for a moment, his expression froze. He looked at Ego, then at Kenechukwu, and back at her. It's been a long time, Ego said, her voice trembling. This is Kenechukwu. He's your son. Tob's face hardened. He stepped back slightly, glancing around as if worried someone might see them. Ego, he said firmly, keeping his voice low. I'm married now. I have a family. Please don't bring up the past. I'm happy where I am. Ego felt her heart shatter. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. But Tob, she pleaded. Kenechukwu deserves to know his father. He's a good boy, and he needs you in his life. I'm sorry, Tob said, avoiding her gaze. This isn't my responsibility anymore. Please, Ego, just stay away from me. Without another word, Tob turned and walked away, leaving Ego standing in the middle of the market, stunned and heartbroken. That night, Ego sat beside Kenechukwu as he lay in bed. She stroked his hair gently, her thoughts swirling with pain and anger. I'm sorry, my son, she whispered. Your father doesn't want to be part of our lives. But you don't need him. I will be both your mother and your father. Kenechukwu looked up at her with determined eyes. Mama, I don't need him. I promise I never ask about him again. I will make you proud, Mama. I'll always be here for you. Tears streamed down Ego's face as she hugged her son tightly. That night, both mother and son made silent promises to each other to always stand by one another, no matter what. Years passed, and Ego's sacrifices bore fruit. She raised Kenechukwu to be a hardworking and respectful young man. Despite the challenges she faced as a single mother, she gave him the best education she could afford and taught him the values of humility, kindness, and determination. Kenechukwu, in turn, did not disappoint her. He excelled in school and later graduated with honors, quickly rising in the business world. His intelligence and work ethic helped him build a thriving tech company, making him one of the most successful young men in the city. Now wealthy and undeniably handsome, Kenechukwu attracted attention wherever he went. Women were drawn to his confidence and charm. But Ego noticed something that troubled her. Many of these women seemed more interested in his wealth than in who he was as a person. At social events, they would surround him, laughing at his jokes and competing for his attention. Ego saw through their shallow compliments and eager smiles. They didn't know the Kenechukwu she had raised, the boy who had grown up with nothing but a dream and a strong will. One day, as Kenechukwu visited Ego at home, he shared some news that startled her. "Mama, there's someone I've been seeing," he said casually, sitting across from her at the small dining table. Ego looked up from the fabric she was folding. "Someone? A woman?" Kenechukwu nodded with a smile. "Her name is Amora. We've been together for a while now. She's Amora, beautiful, confident, and sophisticated. I think she's the one." Ego's heart sank a little, but she forced herself to smile. "You've never mentioned her before. Why haven't you brought her to meet me?" Kenechukwu hesitated. "She's been busy with work. She's a fashion designer, and her schedule is packed. But I promise you'll meet her soon." Ego nodded, though unease crept into her heart. She didn't want to judge a woman she hadn't met, but she couldn't ignore the pattern she had seen in so many others. Later that week, Kenechukwu made a decision. He invited Amora over to his house for a private dinner, planning to propose. Amora, as always, looked stunning. Her flawless makeup and elegant dress complemented her striking features. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who was used to being admired. During dinner, Kenechukwu reached for her hand and looked into her eyes. "Amora," he began, "these past few months have been the best of my life. You've brought joy and excitement into my world, and I can't imagine my future without you." Amora's smile widened as Kenechukwu pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" he asked. Amora gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "Kenechukwu, yes. Of course, I will." As they embraced, Kenechukwu felt a wave of happiness. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered his mother's words, "Are you sure they care for you, and not just your money?" Kenechukwu decided to tell Ego the next day, eager to share the good news. "Mama," he said, grinning, "Amora and I are engaged." Ego's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "That's wonderful, my son. When will I meet her?" "Very soon, Mama," Kenechukwu replied. But Ego couldn't shake her unease. She had seen too many women try to charm her son, and something about Amora's description, beautiful, sophisticated, and confident, set off a quiet alarm in her heart. Ego lived a simple life, despite her son's growing wealth. She preferred staying in her modest home, surrounded by familiar neighbors, rather than moving into Kenechukwu's luxurious mansion. She enjoyed her independence and felt a deep connection to the small community that had supported her. One evening, Ego made her way home from the local market with a bag of fruits and vegetables. The streets were quieter than usual, and she quickened her pace, clutching her bag tightly. Out of nowhere, 3 men emerged from a dark alley. Their faces were partially hidden, and their movements were intimidating. "Madam, drop the bag," one of them barked, stepping closer. Ego froze. "Please, I have nothing of value," she stammered, trying to back away. But the men didn't listen. One of them grabbed her arm roughly, making her cry out. "Let her go," a voice rang out from behind them. The thugs turned to see a young woman standing a few feet away. She was petite but carried herself with surprising confidence. "This is none of your business," one of the men growled. The young woman didn't budge. "You heard me. Let her go, or I'll call the police," she said, holding up her phone. The men hesitated for a moment before deciding it wasn't worth the trouble. They released Ego and disappeared into the shadows. Ego, still trembling, turned to the young woman. "Thank you, my dear. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stepped in." "It's nothing, Ma," the woman replied with a warm smile. "Are you okay? Do you live nearby?" Ego nodded. "Yes, I live just a few streets away. My name is Ego." "I'm Ngozi," the woman said. "Let me walk you home, just to be safe." Ego was struck by Ngozi's kindness and humility. She didn't just help her, she stayed by her side until they reached her house. After thanking Ngozi profusely, Ego couldn't stop thinking about her. Who was this young woman who had risked herself to help a stranger? The next day, Ego casually mentioned the encounter to her neighbor, who often knew everyone in the area. "That's Ngozi," the neighbor said. "She's a secretary at some big company. A very sweet girl, always helping people around here." Ego's curiosity deepened. She decided to do some discreet investigating, asking a few more questions. She discovered that Ngozi worked as a secretary in none other than Kenechukwu's company. The revelation surprised her. Could it be fate? The more she learned about Ngozi, the more impressed she became. Ngozi came from a humble family and had worked hard to get where she was. Despite her struggles, she was known for her kindness and generosity. Ego sat in her small living room that evening, reflecting on the encounter. "She didn't know who I was," Ego thought to herself. "She helped me without expecting anything in return. That's rare." She made a mental note to observe Ngozi further. There was something about her that gave Ego hope that perhaps not everyone in Kenechukwu's life was motivated by money or appearances. Ngozi arrived at work early every morning, ready to tackle the day's challenges with her usual quiet determination. As Kenechukwu's secretary, she handled his demanding schedule with ease and ensured the office ran smoothly. She was efficient, respectful, and always professional. To Kenechukwu, Ngozi was indispensable, a key part of his company's success. He admired her dedication and work ethic but never saw her as more than an excellent employee. What Kenechukwu didn't know was that Ngozi had secretly admired him for years. She was drawn to his intelligence, charm, and the kindness he showed to those around him. But she kept her feelings buried, convinced that someone like him, wealthy, successful, and surrounded by glamorous women, would never notice someone like her. "He's out of my league," Ngozi often told herself, pushing aside the pangs of longing that surfaced whenever Kenechukwu smiled at her or thanked her for a job well done. Meanwhile, Ego couldn't stop thinking about Ngozi. She wanted Kenechukwu to see what she saw in the young woman: humility, strength, and a kind heart. One evening, she brought up Ngozi during their usual dinner conversation. "Kenechukwu," she began as they sat in the dining room of his luxurious home, "there's something I want to tell you." "What is it, Mama?" Kenechukwu asked, looking up from his plate. Ego hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Do you remember the other day when I told you I was attacked by some thugs near the market?" Kenechukwu's expression darkened. "Yes, I still can't believe something like that happened. Are you sure you're okay now?" "I'm fine," Ego assured him. But what I didn't tell you is that a young woman saved me that day. Her name is Ngozi, and she works at your company as your secretary." Kenechukwu raised an eyebrow. "Ngozi? She saved you?" Ego nodded, a smile forming on her lips. "She didn't know who I was, but she stepped in without hesitation. She was brave, kind, and didn't expect anything in return. It made me think. I wish most young ladies had a heart like hers." Kenechukwu leaned back in his chair, considering his mother's words. "Ngozi is a good person," he admitted. "She's hardworking and humble. I rely on her a lot at the office." But what?" Ego pressed. Kenechukwu shrugged. "I know what you're driving at, Mama, but I've never thought about her in that way. She's simple. I mean, I respect her, but I'm usually more attracted to women who are sophisticated, like Amora." Ego's smile faltered slightly, but she didn't let her disappointment show. "Sophistication is nice, Kenechukwu," she said gently. "But it's not what makes a good wife. A selfless heart, loyalty, and kindness, that's what truly matters." "I know, Mama," Kenechukwu replied. "And I promise I keep that in mind. But Amora is nice too, and I'm sure you'll like her after you meet her." Ego nodded, though her unease lingered. She didn't want to interfere in Kenechukwu's decisions, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Amora wasn't the right woman for him. As the evening went on, Ego couldn't help but wonder how she could make Kenechukwu see beyond appearances and appreciate the things that truly mattered in a partner. Ego could no longer keep her concerns about Amora to herself. After her conversations with Kenechukwu, she grew even more uneasy about his engagement. She needed to know if Amora truly loved Kenechukwu for who he was, or if she was simply drawn to his wealth and status. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Ego shared her plan. "Kenechukwu," she began, "I need to know if Amora is the right woman for you. I can't shake the feeling that something is off. Will you let me test her?" "Test her?" Kenechukwu asked, frowning. "Yes," Ego said firmly. "I'll move into your mansion, but not as your mother. I'll be your maid, and we'll see how Amora treats me when she thinks I'm powerless." How a person treats those they think are beneath them reveals their true character. Kenechukwu sighed, shaking his head. "Mama, do you really think this is necessary? Amora is busy planning our wedding. She's not going to focus on the stuff." Ego's gaze was steady. "Kenechukwu, if you truly want me to support this marriage, you let me do this. If she passes the test, I welcome her with open arms." After a moment of hesitation, Kenechukwu relented. "Fine, Mama. I'll go along with it. But I'm only doing this for your peace of mind." A few days later, Ego packed a small bag and moved into Kenechukwu's mansion. She dressed in plain clothes, wrapped a scarf around her head, and kept her demeanor humble. The house staff, who were loyal to Ego, were told to address her as ESI, the new maid. That evening, Kenechukwu invited Amora to move in with him temporarily, claiming it would help them finalize their wedding plans. Amora arrived in her usual stunning style, wearing a designer dress and carrying expensive luggage. Kenechukwu introduced Ego as the new maid. "This is ESI," he said curtly. "She'll take care of things around the house." Amora barely glanced at Ego, offering only a dismissive nod before turning her attention back to Kenechukwu. The next morning, Ego began her duties as a maid, cleaning, cooking, and serving meals. She noticed that Amora didn't acknowledge her unless she needed something. Even then, her tone was sharp and condescending. "ESI, bring me some water," Amora called out from the couch one afternoon. When Ego quickly complied, Amora didn't even look up from her phone. Ego tried to engage Amora in small talk during her chores, but Amora only responded with brief, uninterested answers. One evening, Kenechukwu decided to escalate the test. As Ego served dinner, he deliberately raised his voice, shouting at her for no reason. "ESI, why is this food cold?" he barked, slamming his fork on the table. Ego bowed her head, playing her role perfectly. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll warm it up right away." Amora watched silently, her expression unreadable. She didn't say a word in Ego's defense, nor did she question Kenechukwu's behavior. After Ego left the dining room, Kenechukwu turned to Amora. "Do you think I was too harsh on her?" Amora shrugged. "She's just a maid, Kenechukwu. If she made a mistake, she should fix it. You shouldn't feel bad about holding her accountable." Kenechukwu's stomach twisted at her words. He had hoped Amora would speak up or show some compassion, but instead, she dismissed Ego as if she didn't matter. Later that night, Ego sat in her small room, reflecting on the day's events. Her heart felt heavy, but she wasn't surprised by Amora's behavior. When Kenechukwu came to check on her, she looked up at him with sad eyes. "You see what I mean now?" Kenechukwu nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling over him. "I didn't think she would act that way. I expected her to at least say something when I shouted at you. This is why I wanted to test her," Ego said. "Marriage isn't just about love, Kenechukwu. It's about character, kindness, and how someone treats the people around them. If Amora can't show compassion to someone she thinks is a maid, how will she treat your family? Your future children?" Kenechukwu didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing for sure: Ego's concerns were valid. Days turned into weeks, and Ego's role as the maid in Kenechukwu's mansion gave her a front row seat to Amora's true nature. Amora's dismissive and rude behavior became more apparent whenever Kenechukwu wasn't around. "Old woman, can't you move faster?" Amora snapped one afternoon as Ego carefully dusted the furniture. "You're so slow. It's like watching a snail." Ego swallowed her pride and kept quiet, knowing this was part of the test. But the insults kept coming. One morning, Amora called Ego into the kitchen. A glass of water sat on the counter. "ESI, Amora said, her tone icy, you forgot to clean this glass yesterday." Before Ego could respond, Amora grabbed the glass and poured its contents over Ego's hands. "You're so old and lazy. I don't even know why Kenechukwu keeps you here. Do your job properly next time." Ego's heart ached at the humiliation, but she didn't let her emotions show. Instead, she looked at Amora and said softly, "I could be your mother, you know. I'm not so young anymore. Just be a little more patient with me." Amora sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "My mother could never be a poor, disgusting maid like you. So stop acting like you're anything important and do your job." Later that day, Kenechukwu had forgotten an important file at home. Ngozi, ever reliable, stopped by the house to retrieve it. She knocked on the door and was surprised when Ego answered. "It's you," Ngozi exclaimed, recognizing the elderly woman she had helped in the market. "I didn't know you worked here." Ego smiled warmly, her spirits lifting at Ngozi's kind tone. "Yes, my dear. I'm just helping around. Ngozi stepped inside, but before she could say much, Amora's voice echoed from the living room. ESI, what are you doing standing there? Get back to work. Ngozi turned toward the voice and saw Amora lounging on the couch, her perfectly manicured fingers scrolling through her phone. I'm so sorry, Igo murmured to Ngozi, hurrying to the living room with a tray of tea. Ngozi followed quietly, watching in disbelief as Amora began berating Igo for being slow and incompetent. You're pathetic, Amora spat. Kenechukwu should just fire you. I don't know why he bothers keeping someone so useless around. Ngozi couldn't stay silent any longer. Excuse me, Miss Amora, she said, her voice firm but polite. But don't you think you're being a bit harsh? She hasn't even done anything wrong. Amora looked up, startled. And who are you to tell me how to talk to my staff? I'm someone who believes in treating people with respect, no matter their position, Ngozi replied, standing her ground. Amora rolled her eyes. You don't understand how things work here. This woman is paid to do her job, and if she can't handle criticism, she should leave. Ngozi turned to Igo, her expression filled with concern. Ma, if you ever want to leave this place, you're welcome to come and stay with me. No one deserves to be treated like this. Igo felt tears sting her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, nodding at Ngozi's kindness. Amora scoffed. Mind your own business, little Miss Secretary. You're overstepping your boundaries. Ngozi held her ground. Kindness is never out of bounds, Miss Amora. Maybe you should try it sometime. Amora snapped, if you're done playing hero, you can leave now. I have better things to do than argue with someone like you. Ngozi retrieved the file she came for and gave Igo a parting look. If you ever need help, please don't hesitate to reach out, she said softly before leaving. Igo watched Ngozi go, her heart warmed by the younger woman's kindness and courage. The stark difference between Ngozi's treatment of her and Amora's cruelty was impossible to ignore. Later that evening, as Igo sat in her small room, she reflected on the day's events. Amora's behavior had revealed the harsh truth she had suspected all along. Amora lacked the compassion and respect that Igo believed was essential in a partner for her son. Ngozi, on the other hand, had proven once again that her kindness wasn't just a passing gesture, it was a fundamental part of who she was. It was a quiet afternoon in the mansion. Igo, still disguised as ESI, had been sent to the market by Amora to buy groceries. Igo didn't mind the task, it gave her time to think about how she would approach Kenechukwu about everything she had observed. As she returned to the mansion, she realized she had forgotten her scarf at home and decided to rush back to retrieve it. Just then, Igo entered the house quietly. She heard Amora talking on the phone in the living room. The tone of her voice was sharp and agitated. Curious, Igo paused, staying out of sight behind the partially open door. I can't believe this, Amora was saying angrily. I'm pregnant, and I cannot tell Kenechukwu because we've never been intimate. It's all because of that ridiculous advice from his mother, wait till marriage, he says. Ugh. Igo's blood ran cold as she listened. Amora was pregnant. That didn't make sense. Kenechukwu had told her he was waiting for marriage. Wow, that means Amora has been seeing another man, Igo thought. I can't lose Kenechukwu, Amora continued, her frustration clear. He's my golden ticket. If I lose him, I lose everything. There was a pause as her friend on the other end spoke, and then Amora replied, her voice quieter but laced with desperation. What do you mean? Put something in his drink? Are you serious? Igor's heart began to race. She leaned closer, her breathing shallow as she tried to hear every word. Look, Amora's friend said, her voice faintly audible through the phone, if you don't act fast, you might lose him for good. Slip something in his drink, get him in the mood, and make it happen. If he finds out you're pregnant later, he'll have no choice but to marry you. Igor couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and began recording the conversation. I don't know, Amora said, pacing the room. What if it doesn't work? What if he doesn't, go along with it? Her friend laughed coldly. Then you'll have to take more drastic measures. If you want that lifestyle, Amora, you have to fight for it. Do whatever it takes. Igor's stomach churned as she captured the exchange on video. She couldn't believe the lengths Amora was willing to go to trap her son with another man's child. Amora finally stopped pacing and let out a heavy sigh. Fine. I'll do it tonight. He'll be home late, and I'll make sure it happens. He'll never know what hit him. Igor stepped back silently, her mind racing. She had seen enough. She slipped out of the house without Amora noticing and headed to the market, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and fear. When Igor returned to the mansion, she locked herself in her small room and replayed the video. The evidence was undeniable. Amora's cruelty and deceit went far deeper than she had ever imagined. She sat on the edge of her bed, her thoughts spinning. What kind of woman is this? She whispered to herself. How can she be planning something so vile against my son? It was late in the evening when Kenechukwu returned home after a long day at work. He looked tired as he walked into the living room, loosening his tie. Amora greeted him with her usual charm, planting a quick kiss on his cheek. You look exhausted, Amora said sweetly. Let me get you something to drink. It'll help you relax. Kenechukwu nodded absent-mindedly, sinking into the couch. In the kitchen, Amora moved quickly. She reached into her handbag, pulling out a small vial of powder. She glanced around to ensure no one was watching before sprinkling the substance into a glass of juice. A sinister smile played on her lips as she stirred it and carried it back to Kenechukwu. Meanwhile, Igor, who had been monitoring Amora's every move, was prepared. She emerged from the shadows of the hallway, her eyes sharp and unwavering. Kenechukwu, Igor called out just as he reached for the glass. Wait. Kenechukwu looked up, surprised. ESI, what's wrong? You can't drink that, Igor said firmly, stepping into the room. Amora's face twisted with irritation. What are you doing, ESI? This is none of your business. It is my business, Igor shot back, her voice steady. Because I know what you put in that glass. Kenechukwu's brows furrowed. What is she talking about, Amora? Amora laughed nervously, waving her hand dismissively. This old woman is crazy, Kenechukwu. You need to get rid of her. She's been nothing but trouble since the day she got here. But Igor wasn't backing down. Kenechukwu, I've tolerated enough insults for the sake of the test, but I can't stay silent any longer. I know exactly who Amora is and what she's been plotting. Amora, Kenechukwu said, his tone cautious. What is she talking about? Igor straightened, her gaze unwavering. Kenechukwu, it's time she knows the truth. The room fell silent. Amora's jaw dropped, and her face turned pale. What truth? she exclaimed, her voice shaking. Kanechukwu stared at Ego, stunned. Amora, this is Madam Ego, my mother. And this was all a test. Yes, Ego admitted. I needed to know the kind of person you truly are, and now I have proof. She pulled out her phone and played the video she had recorded earlier. The room filled with Amora's voice as she told her friend about her pregnancy, her plan to drug Kanechukwu, and her desperation to secure his wealth. Kanechukwu's face darkened as the video played. Amora stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Kanechukwu, she stammered, it's not what it looks like. I was just joking with my friend. You know how women talk sometimes. Kanechukwu's voice was cold as ice. Joking? You call drugging me and stealing my wealth a joke? Amora moved closer to him, tears filling her eyes. Please, Kanechukwu, I love you. I only did this because I was scared of losing you. Ego stepped forward, her voice firm. Love doesn't involve manipulation and lies, Amora. You've shown your true colors, and they're nothing but greed and selfishness. Kanechukwu looked at Amora, his disappointment clear. I trusted you. I thought you loved me for who I am, not for what I have. But now I see I was wrong. Amora fell to her knees, sobbing. Please, Kanechukwu, don't do this. I can change. I'll be better. But Kanechukwu shook his head. It's too late, Amora. Pack your things and leave. Moments later, Amora was escorted out of the house by security, her tears doing nothing to sway Kanechukwu. Ego stood by her son's side, her heart heavy but relieved that the truth had come to light. As the door slammed shut behind Amora, Kanechukwu turned to Ego. Mama, he said quietly, I can't believe what you've done for me. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stepped in. Ego smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. I only want what's best for you, my son. You deserve someone who will love you for who you are, not for what you can give them. Kanechukwu nodded, his respect for his mother growing even deeper. The weeks following Amora's betrayal were difficult for Kanechukwu. The sting of her deceit left him questioning his judgment and his ability to trust others. Ego stayed close by, offering her support and reminding him that not everyone in his life had bad intentions. Mama, Kanechukwu said one evening as they sat in the garden, how do I know someone loves me for who I am and not for what I have? Amora said all the right things, but look how that ended. Ego smiled gently, her hands resting on his. Kanechukwu, trust takes time. Not everyone is like Amora. Sometimes, the right person is already in your life. You just need to see them for who they are. Kanechukwu thought about her words, and one name came to mind, Ngozi. Ngozi, he murmured. Yes, Ego said, her eyes lighting up. I see the way she carries herself with grace and sincerity. I've seen it since the day she saved me in the market. You should give her a chance. Kanechukwu hesitated. But what if I'm wrong again? What if she's just better at hiding it? Ego shook her head. If you really want to know someone's intentions, test them the right way. See how they react when the wealth and luxury are gone. That night, Kanechukwu made up his mind. He wanted to pursue a relationship with Ngozi but needed to be certain of her motives. The next day, Kanechukwu approached Ngozi at her desk. Ngozi, he began, his voice calm but serious, I've been thinking a lot about us. I'd like to spend more time with you outside of work. Would you be willing to go out with me? Ngozi looked up, surprised. Her cheeks flushed, and she smiled shyly. Of course, Kenechukwu. I mean, Mr. Kenechukwu, I'd love to. Call me Kenechukwu, he said with a smile. Their relationship began slowly. Ngozi's warmth and sincerity helped Kenechukwu heal from the pain Amora had caused. She never asked for expensive gifts or extravagant dates, and her humility only deepened his admiration for her. But a lingering doubt still gnawed at Kenechukwu. Was Ngozi truly different, or was she simply waiting for the right moment? One evening, he discussed his concerns with Ego. Mama, I want to trust her, but I need to know for sure. Ego, ever supportive, encouraged him. If you need proof, then test her. But remember, Ngozi has shown nothing but kindness, even when she didn't know who we were. Keep that in mind. The following week, Kenechukwu set his plan in motion. He spread rumors among his employees and close associates that his company had collapsed. He sent out an official email stating that due to bad investments, the business had gone bankrupt. The news of Kenechukwu's downfall spread like wildfire. His so-called friends and business partners disappeared overnight. Invitations to social gatherings ceased, and the once busy office grew quiet. Ngozi, however, remained by his side. She didn't complain when he moved into a modest apartment, nor did she question why he had suddenly lost everything. Instead, she worked even harder at the office, offering encouragement whenever Kenechukwu seemed disheartened. One evening, as they sat on a park bench, Ngozi took his hand in hers. Kenechukwu, I don't care if you're rich or poor. What matters is the person you are. I believe in you. Kenechukwu looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. She had never once asked for anything, never expected luxuries or demanded his attention. All she ever gave was kindness, and now, he knew, this was real. That night, Kenechukwu went to his mother. Mama, you were right. Ngozi's heart is pure. She stood by me when I had nothing. Ego smiled knowingly. Then you have your answer, my son. The very next day, Kenechukwu revealed the truth, his business had never collapsed. It was all a test. Ngozi was shocked but not angry. You did what you had to do, Kenechukwu, she said with a small smile. And I'm glad you found your answer. Kenechukwu knew he had found the one. That weekend, he proposed to Ngozi in the simplest yet most meaningful way. He took her to the orphanage he had been supporting for years, knelt among the children, and said, Ngozi, you've shown me what true love is. Will you walk this journey with me? Tears of joy filled Ngozi's eyes. Yes, Kenechukwu. 1,000 times, yes. Their wedding was not extravagant but was filled with love, laughter, and the presence of those who truly mattered. Ego, standing proudly by her son's side, knew her mission was complete. As for Amora, she disappeared into the shadows, forgotten by the world she once tried to manipulate. But Kenechukwu and Ngozi thrived, building a life rooted in love, respect, and the lessons learned from a mother's wisdom. And so, the mother's test came to an end, not just proving the purity of a woman's love, but securing the happiness of a son who had once been blind to what truly mattered. Moral of the story. True love is not measured by wealth, status, or appearances, but by the depth of one's heart and the ability to stand by you in both good times and bad. A person's true character is revealed in how they treat others, especially when there is nothing to gain. Wisdom and patience often lead us to the right path, and the greatest wealth in life is love, loyalty, and sincerity.